Yun walked through the long, bright hallways of the Galactic Academy's genetic engineering facility. Her heart beat faster with each step. She had waited 3 years to get this internship, and now, at 16, she was finally here. The white walls gleamed, and the air smelled clean and fresh. Other students rushed past her, heading to see the popular creatures. Yun heard them talking excitedly about the shimmer cats with their glowing fur and the star wolves that could run between solar systems. But something else caught her attention, a soft sound coming from a side corridor that nobody seemed to notice. Following the sound, Yun found herself in a quieter part of the facility. The lights here were dimmer, and fewer people walked by. At the end of the hall stood a large containment unit with thick, clear walls. Inside, a creature lay curled up, its scales a mix of different colors that didn't match. "Oh, he found him," said a tired-looking staff member named Du Yun, who appeared behind her. "That's container number 2187. He's a failed experiment." Yun pressed her hand against the clear wall. The dragon inside lifted its head, revealing mismatched eyes, one gold, one deep purple. Its face wasn't symmetrical like the other engineered creatures. One horn curved up, while the other twisted sideways. The scales on its left side shimmered in blues and greens, while the right side showed patches of copper and bronze. "Failed, but he's breathing. He's moving. He looks healthy," Yun said, watching as the dragon tilted its head to study her. Du Yun sighed and checked his data tablet. "Technically, yes. All his systems work perfectly. He can fly, breathe fire, and process any type of fuel we give him. But look at him. The genetic mixing didn't work right. He's ugly. Nobody wants to buy an ugly dragon." The dragon made a soft, rumbling sound and moved closer to the wall where Yun stood. She noticed how gracefully it moved, despite its unusual appearance. Its eyes showed intelligence and curiosity. "How long has he been here?" she asked, not looking away from the creature. "Almost a year. We've shown him to dozens of potential buyers, but," Du Yun shrugged, "we'll probably have to recycle him soon. It costs too much to keep feeding him." Yun's stomach turned at the thought. She remembered what her grandmother Tati always told her. True beauty isn't in perfect symmetry. It's in the heart that beats beneath the surface. The dragon pressed its snout against the wall near her hand. Despite his mismatched colors, Yun thought she had never seen anything so interesting in her life. All the other engineered creatures looked too perfect, too planned. This one had character. "Does he have a name?" she asked. "Just a number," Du Yun replied, already turning to leave. "Don't waste too much time here. The popular specimens are in the main hall. That's where you'll want to focus your internship studies." But Yun stayed where she was. The dragon watched her with those strange, beautiful eyes. She thought about her scholarship money, saved carefully over the past 3 years. It was supposed to pay for her advanced studies next term. "I think I'll call you Dae-sung," she whispered to the dragon. "It means great achievement, because that's what you're going to be, even if nobody else can see it yet." The dragon's eyes seemed to brighten at the sound of the name. For the first time, it made a sound that wasn't sad, a soft, musical trill that made Yun smile. She had come to the academy hoping to learn about extraordinary creatures, but she never expected to find one that everyone else had overlooked. She knew, right then, that her life was about to change in a big way. And judging by the way Dae-sung watched her, he knew it too. Yun couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dae-sung's mismatched ones looking back at her. She got up and walked to her window in the student dormitory, looking out at the 3 moons that lit up the academy grounds. She pulled out her tablet and checked her bank account again. The numbers hadn't changed. 3 years of saved scholarship money, meant for next term's advanced classes. It was just enough to buy a dragon. Her grandmother's latest message played in her head. "Yun, my dear, remember why you wanted to study at the academy. Not to follow others, but to understand the hearts of all living things. The next morning, Hei-yun went straight to Do-yun's office. The researcher looked up from his desk, surprised to see her so early. "I want to buy him," she said before she could change her mind. "I want to buy Dae-sung. I mean specimen 2187. Do-yun put down his coffee cup slowly. "You want to buy the failed dragon. But you're just a student. Do you know how much it costs to feed a dragon? Where would you even keep him?" "I've done the math," Hei-yun said, pulling out her tablet. She showed him her calculations. "My room has a high ceiling, and there's the outdoor exercise area for engineered creatures. I can work extra hours in the lab to pay for his food." "Hei-yun," Do-yun said softly, like he was talking to a child. "Think about your future. That money is for your education. Why waste it on an ugly dragon that nobody wants?" "He's not ugly," Hei-yun said firmly. "He's different, and being different doesn't mean he's worth less." Her words hung in the air. Do-yun studied her face for a long moment. "Your grandmother is Tae, isn't she? The one who wrote that famous paper about emotional intelligence in engineered creatures?" Hei-yun nodded, surprised he knew. Do-yun sighed and pulled up the sales forms on his screen. "She was my teacher, you know. She always said we focused too much on making things perfect and forgot to make them real." He looked at Hei-yun with new respect. "You're just like her." Together, they filled out the papers. Hei-yun's hands shook as she pressed her thumb to the scanner, transferring her savings. Just like that, she became the owner of a dragon. When they went to get Dae-sung, other students gathered to watch. Some laughed and pointed at the dragon's mismatched scales, but when Dae-sung stepped out of his container, he moved with quiet grace. He walked straight to Hei-yun and lowered his great head to her. "Hello," she said softly, touching his warm scales for the first time. Under her hand, she felt his heart beating, strong and steady. Ne-young, her best friend from the Centauri colonies, pushed through the crowd. "Hei-yun, are you sure about this? He's so different." "Yes," Hei-yun said, watching Dae-sung stretch his wings for the first time in months. The morning light caught his scales, and suddenly all his different colors blazed like a sunrise. "He's perfect exactly as he is." Do-yun watched them with thoughtful eyes. "You know," he said quietly, "most people look at him and see a mistake, but you look at him and see possibilities. Maybe that's what makes humans special. Not our ability to make things perfect, but our ability to see the value in imperfection." As Hei-yun led Dae-sung to his new home, she felt the weight of everyone's stares, but with each step she stood taller. Sometimes the bravest thing wasn't fighting monsters or exploring space. Sometimes it was simply choosing to see beauty where others saw none. The first week with Dae-sung tested Hei-yun in ways she hadn't expected. Her room, which had seemed big enough during planning, now felt very small with a dragon in it. Dae-sung tried his best to curl up tightly at night, but his tail kept knocking books off her shelf. The bigger problem was food. Dragons needed special fuel to make their fire, and it cost more than Hei-yun had thought. She started skipping lunch to save money for Dae-sung's meals. Ne-young noticed and began sharing her food with Hei-yun, even though she still felt nervous around the dragon. "You're getting too thin," Ne-young said one day, pushing her extra sandwich across the table. "And everyone's talking about you, you know." Hei-yun knew. She heard the whispers in class. Some students called her the Dragon Girl and moved away when she sat near them. Others made fun of Dae-sung's appearance, calling him the patchwork pet because of his mixed-up colors. But something interesting happened during their evening study sessions. While Hei-yun worked on her advanced mathematics homework, Dae-sung would watch the numbers on her screen. One night, when she was stuck on a difficult problem, he made a soft growling sound and pointed his nose at her tablet. "What is it?" she asked, tired and frustrated. Dae-sung carefully tapped the screen with one claw, pointing to a mistake in her calculations. Hei-yun checked the numbers again and realized he was right. She had copied down the wrong number early in the problem. which made everything else wrong. "You can do math?" she asked, amazed. The dragon's mismatched eyes seemed to sparkle. He nodded, then used his claw to write numbers in the dust on her floor. Soon, Hei-yun discovered that Dae-sung could solve complex equations faster than any student in her class. His unusual brain, with its mixed-up genetics, could see patterns that others missed. Professor Lee noticed the change in Hei-yun's work. "Your mathematical thinking has improved greatly," she said after class one day. "How did you make such progress?" Before Hei-yun could answer, they heard shouting from the hallway. They ran out to find a group of students backing away from Dae-sung, who had been waiting for Hei-yun. "Keep that monster away from us," someone yelled. "What if he breathes fire?" "He's not a monster," Hei-yun said, walking calmly to Dae-sung's side. "He's my friend, and he's smarter than all of us." Professor Lee watched with interest as Dae-sung gently bumped his head against Hei-yun's shoulder. "Perhaps," she said thoughtfully, "you should bring your friend to class tomorrow. I'd like to see these mathematical abilities myself." That night, as Hei-yun shared her dinner with Dae-sung, she felt hope growing. Yes, things were hard. Yes, her savings were almost gone. But when Dae-sung helped her with another difficult problem, his strange eyes bright with intelligence, she knew she had made the right choice. "We'll show them," she whispered, patting his warm scales. "We'll show them that different can be better." Dae-sung made a happy rumbling sound and wrote a perfect geometric formula in the dust, just to make her smile. The Academy's main research facility buzzed with excitement that morning. Scientists were testing a new type of power core, one that could help spaceships travel faster than ever before. Hei-yun and her classmates watched from the observation deck as the researchers worked. Dae-sung lay curled in the back of the room, where Professor Lee had allowed him to stay during classes. His different colored eyes followed the movement of the power core with unusual interest. Hei-yun noticed him becoming more and more restless. "What's wrong?" she whispered to him. The dragon kept shifting his gaze between the power core below and Hei-yun's face. Then he did something he had never done before. He stood up in the middle of class and roared. Everyone jumped. Some students screamed, but Hei-yun saw real fear in both of Dae-sung's eyes. "Something's wrong," she said loudly. "He's trying to tell us something." Professor Lee raised her hand for silence. "Hei-yun, explain quickly." "I don't know exactly, but Dae-sung never acts like this. He sees something we don't." Down in the testing area, the scientists continued their work, unaware of the commotion above. The power core glowed brighter. Dae-sung pressed his snout against the observation window. His mismatched eyes reflected the light strangely. And suddenly, Hei-yun understood. "His eyes," she shouted. "His right eye sees heat patterns, and his left eye sees radiation. They made him that way by accident. He can see things we need special equipment to detect." Professor Lee grabbed the emergency comm unit. "Stop the test immediately," she ordered. "The dragon is detecting dangerous radiation patterns." At first, the scientists looked confused, but then their instruments started beeping wildly. The power core was becoming unstable in a way their regular sensors hadn't detected. They rushed to shut it down. Dae-sung didn't relax until the core was safely contained. Then he sagged against Hei-yun, trembling slightly. "You saved everyone," she whispered, hugging his neck. "You saw what no one else could see." The research facility's head scientist, Dr. Jin, came to the observation deck himself. His face was pale. If that core had overloaded, he shook his head. How did the dragon know? Professor Lee explained about Dae-sung's special eyes. Dr. Jin listened with growing interest. "A mutation we thought was a flaw," he said slowly, "turned out to be an incredible safety feature. Those mismatched eyes can see both heat and radiation at the same time, something none of our equipment can do." Students who had moved away from Dae-sung now crowded closer, wanting to see his special eyes for themselves. Nae-young stepped forward and bowed to the dragon. "I'm sorry I ever thought you were ugly," she said. "Your eyes are beautiful because they keep people safe." That afternoon, Dr. Jin officially hired Dae-sung as the facility's safety inspector. Hae-yun would bring him to work 3 days a week, and his salary would cover all his food and care. Beauty isn't just about looking pretty, Dr. Jin told the gathered students. True beauty lies in being exactly what you need to be at exactly the right moment. Today, we needed those unusual eyes to prevent a disaster. Hae-yun smiled as she watched Dae-sung accept gentle pats from students who had once feared him. Sometimes the very thing that makes you different, she thought, is the thing that makes you invaluable. A month after the Power Core incident, Hae-yun sat in the academy's garden, reading her genetics textbook. Dae-sung lay beside her, his warm scales glowing in different colors under the afternoon sun. Things had changed a lot since he became the facility's safety inspector. "Look at this," Hae-yun said, showing Dae-sung the page about genetic mixing. "It says here that some traits aren't supposed to work together, but you have lots of those traits, and they work just fine." Dae-sung lifted his head and looked at the book with his mismatched eyes. He could see both the regular text and the hidden watermarks used to protect official academy books. This was another surprise they had discovered about his special vision. Dr. Jin had been studying Dae-sung's genetics with Hae-yun's help. They found out that his unusual appearance came from having many different useful traits that usually couldn't exist together. His copper scales could resist high temperatures. His blue scales could detect changes in air pressure. Even his twisted horn worked like a sensor for atmospheric chemicals. "You're not ugly," Hae-yun told him, touching his warm scales. "You're just carrying more gifts than most dragons can handle." Dae-sung made a happy rumbling sound and wrote in the dirt with his claw. "Different is strong." He had learned to write whole sentences now, and Hae-yun had learned to understand his many different sounds. She knew when he was happy, worried, or trying to tell her something important. They had their own special way of talking. One day, while they were checking the research facility, Dae-sung suddenly stopped. He wrote quickly in the dust, "Energy patterns changing. New thing coming." Hae-yun had learned to trust his warnings. She called Dr. Jin right away. When they checked the sensors, they found that a solar flare was about to hit the academy. Thanks to Dae-sung's early warning, they had time to protect all the sensitive equipment. "Your dragon," Dr. Jin said later, "is teaching us to see the world in new ways. We thought we knew everything about genetic engineering, but he proves there's so much more to learn." That evening, Nae-young joined them for study group. She had become a close friend now, and Dae-sung liked to help her with math problems too. While they worked, Hae-yun noticed something interesting. "Dae-sung," she said, "can you show Nae-young how you solved that equation yesterday? The one about energy patterns." The dragon drew a beautiful mathematical formula in the dirt. But this time, Hae-yun noticed how the symbols connected to the patterns of his scales. "That's it," she exclaimed. "Your scales, they're not just random colors. They're like a living computer. Each pattern is a formula." Dae-sung nodded excitedly. He spread his wings, showing how the patterns shifted and changed. All this time, his scales hadn't been mismatched by accident. They were storing important information, like a beautiful living library. "We need to document this," Nae-young said, taking pictures with her tablet. "This could change everything we know about bioengineering." Hae-yun hugged Dae-sung's neck, feeling his happy rumble. "You're not just my dragon anymore," she said softly. "You're my teacher too. We all had so much to learn, and you were patient while we learned it." That night, as they walked back to their room under the 3 moons, Hae-yun realized something important. Sometimes the best friendships happen not because everything was perfect, but because 2 different souls had exactly what the other one needed to grow stronger. The day of the annual Xenobiology exhibition arrived. The Academy's great hall was filled with students and their engineered companions. Beautiful star wolves prowled beside their owners. Shimmer cats glowed in perfect rainbow patterns. Every creature looked like it had stepped out of a dream. Hae-yun stood at the entrance with Dae-sung, her heart beating fast. Despite his recent successes, she still heard whispers when they walked in. Some of the judges frowned at Dae-sung's mismatched appearance. "Remember," Na-young said, squeezing Hae-yun's hand, "you're not here to show them a perfect dragon. You're here to show them why different is amazing." They had worked hard to prepare. Their display table showed all of Dae-sung's special abilities: his heat-sensing eye, his radiation detection, his scales that could solve complex math problems. But Hae-yun had discovered something even more impressive that they'd kept secret until now. The first few presentations went exactly as expected. Students showed off their companions' perfect features and standard abilities. The judges nodded and took notes, looking slightly bored. Then it was Hae-yun's turn. "This is Dae-sung," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Many people thought he was a mistake because he looks different. But today, I'll show you why his differences make him special." She started with the things people already knew: how he had saved the facility, how he helped with safety inspections. The judges listened more carefully now. Some even stepped closer to look at his unusual scales. "But there's something else," Hae-yun said. "Something we just discovered. Dae-sung, show them what you can do with the energy spheres." Dr. Jin handed her 3 glowing spheres of different energy types. Normal dragons could only process one type of energy. The perfect ones might handle 2. Hae-yun tossed all 3 spheres to Dae-sung. The crowd gasped as Dae-sung caught them. His scales began to shift and change color. The copper ones absorbed heat energy. The blue ones took in electrical energy. The green ones processed solar power. Instead of getting sick from mixing energy types, he combined them. "Impossible," one judge whispered. "No engineered creature can process multiple energy types at once." But Dae-sung wasn't done. He took all that energy and released it as a beautiful display of light and warmth that filled the hall. His scales showed the mathematical formula for how he did it, writing itself across his body in glowing patterns. "His genetic structure isn't a mistake," Hae-yun explained. "It's an advancement. Because his genes are mixed differently, he can do things no other dragon can do. He's not just surviving with his differences, he's thriving because of them." The hall fell silent. Then Dr. Jin stepped forward. "In 30 years of genetic engineering," he said, "I've never seen anything like this. We've been so focused on making things look perfect that we missed the chance to make them work better. This dragon rewrites everything we thought we knew about genetic possibilities." The judges huddled together, talking in excited whispers. When they turned back, the head judge smiled. "We came here expecting to see perfect creatures," she said. "Instead, we saw the future. First prize goes to Hae-yun and Dae-sung for showing us that different isn't just acceptable, it's extraordinary." As people crowded around to congratulate them, Hae-yun hugged Dae-sung's neck. His scales were warm and happy under her touch. "You did it," she whispered. "You showed them all." Dae-sung wrote in the air with a trail of light. "We did it together." Na-young was crying happy tears. "See, the best things in life don't come in perfect packages. They come in packages that are brave enough to be exactly what they are." News of Dae-sung's abilities spread quickly through the academy. Every day, new scientists came to study him. They took pictures of his scales, measured his energy processing, and watched him solve complex problems. But most importantly, they started to question everything they thought they knew about genetic engineering. One morning, Hae-yun found Do-yun standing outside the container room where she had first met Dae-sung. The researcher was looking at another imperfect creature, a shimmer cat whose colors didn't change smoothly like the others. "What do you see?" Hae-yun asked him. "I see possibilities," Do-yun replied. "This cat's color changes are jerky because it can process information faster than regular shimmer cats. We thought it was a flaw, but what if it's actually better for certain tasks?" Hae-yun smiled. This was exactly what she had hoped would happen. People were starting to look past appearances and see the value in being different. Dr. Jin called a special meeting of all the genetic engineering faculty. Hye-yun and Dae-sung were invited to attend. The great meeting hall was packed with scientists and students. For too long, Dr. Jin said, we've bred creatures to look perfect. We wanted every scale to match, every color to blend, every feature to be symmetrical. But Hye-yun and Dae-sung have shown us that this approach limits what we can achieve. He showed videos of Dae-sung processing multiple energy types. His mismatched eyes let him see things we can't. His different colored scales store more information than we thought possible. Even his twisted horn has special sensing abilities. Nothing about him is a mistake. It's all useful. The scientists began to talk excitedly among themselves. One raised her hand. But our buyers want beautiful creatures. They won't pay for ones that look different. That's where you're wrong, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Na-young's mother, the famous spaceship designer, walking into the hall. We've been watching Dae-sung's progress. My company would pay double the usual price for dragons with his abilities. We need creatures that can detect radiation and process multiple energy types on our ships. Who cares what they look like if they can save lives? More people spoke up. A mining company wanted dragons with Dae-sung's heat-sensing abilities. A research station needed his mathematical skills. Suddenly, being different wasn't a problem. It was exactly what everyone wanted. We need to change our breeding program, Dr. Jin announced. From now on, we won't try to make every creature look the same. We'll focus on developing useful traits, even if they change how the creatures look. Hye-yun felt tears in her eyes as she watched the scientists tear up their old breeding charts and start making new ones. Dae-sung wrote in the air with his light trail. No more lonely dragons. No more lonely dragons, she promised. No more calling them mistakes just because they're different. That afternoon, they visited the containment area again. The shimmer cat with jerky color changes was being adopted by a computer research lab. They had discovered its quick color shifts could process data faster than their best computers. You started all this, Du-yun told Hye-yun. When you looked at Dae-sung and saw value instead of flaws, you taught us all to see differently. Hye-yun patted Dae-sung's warm scales. I just saw him for who he was, she said. Sometimes that's all anyone needs, someone to see past the surface and believe in what's underneath. Dae-sung spread his wings, showing off all his different colored scales proudly. Each one caught the light differently, creating a pattern more beautiful than any perfect matching could achieve. Sometimes, Hye-yun thought, the most wonderful things come from daring to be exactly who you are. 5 years passed. Hye-yun stood in front of the Academy's new genetic research center, looking up at the sign that read, the Dae-sung Institute for Adaptive Engineering. Beside her, Dae-sung had grown even larger, his mismatched scales gleaming in the morning sun. Remember when we first met? She asked him. I was just a student, and you were alone in that container. Dae-sung nodded and wrote in the air with his light trail. Now we help others find their path. Inside the institute, young scientists worked with all kinds of unique creatures. There was a star wolf with 3 tails, each one able to sense different types of space radiation. A shimmer cat with patchy colors could communicate with computers faster than any normal cat. And in the main research area, a new group of dragons showed off their special traits proudly. Na-young, now the head of student research, walked up with a tablet. The latest test results are amazing, she said. Each new generation of engineered creatures is more adaptable than the last. And it all started because you saw beauty where others saw flaws. Hye-yun watched as a young student worked with a small dragon whose scales were even more varied than Dae-sung's. The dragon could process 5 different types of energy at once. More importantly, it looked happy and confident, not ashamed of being different. Professor Hye-yun, called a voice. A new student ran up, looking excited. Can you tell us again how you knew Dae-sung was special? Hye-yun smiled, remembering her grandmother's words about looking beyond the surface. I didn't know he was special, she said. I just knew he deserved a chance. Sometimes that's all anyone needs to show their true worth. Du Yun, now getting gray in his hair, joined them. We were so wrong back then, he said, patting Daesung's side. We thought perfect meant everything had to match. Now we know that perfect means being exactly what you need to be. The academy had changed in other ways too. Every new student learned about Hae-yun and Daesung's story. The old containment area had been turned into a special training center where unique creatures could develop their abilities. No one used the word ugly anymore. They talked about adaptive traits and special features instead. That afternoon, Hae-yun received a message from her grandmother Tae, who was now very old but still kept up with all the research news. "My dear," she wrote, "you have created something wonderful, not just in how we engineer creatures, but in how we see each other. Every time someone chooses kindness over judgment, your story grows stronger." Daesung helped teach the younger dragons how to control their special abilities. He was gentle with them, showing them how to be proud of their differences. The sight always made Hae-yun's heart feel warm. "You know what makes humans special?" she asked him as they watched the young dragons practice. "It's not that we can make perfect things. It's that we can learn to see the perfect in things that others think are flawed." Daesung wrote his response in glowing letters. "And what makes dragons special?" "That you wait patiently while we learn these important lessons," she answered, hugging his neck. Together, they walked out to watch the three suns set. The light caught Daesung's scales, making them shine in all their different colors. Students stopped to admire the display, no longer seeing ugliness but beauty in how the colors didn't match. "We did it," Hae-yun whispered. "We showed them that different isn't just okay. It's wonderful." Daesung spread his wings wide, creating a light show with all his special abilities at once. Above the institute, the sky filled with beautiful patterns that could only be made by a dragon who dared to be himself. And somewhere in the academy, another young student was learning to look past appearances and see the truth, that sometimes the most precious things in life are the ones that don't fit in, the ones that shine in their own special way.